Robert De Niro sat in his dressing room, holding the script for the evening's show. "They want me and Al Pacino to sit there like museum exhibits," he muttered to his agent, Larry, who sat across from him, scrolling through his phone. "This isn't a show, it's a circus." Larry, a man with a graying beard and tired eyes, sighed. "Bob, it's just a talk show. Jimmy Kimmel isn't Johnny Carson, but people love him. Plus, it's good publicity for your new film." De Niro tossed the script onto the table. His voice sharpened. "Publicity? Larry, I don't need publicity from a guy who cracks Trump jokes 5 nights a week. And why did they invite Al Pacino? So we can look like two dinosaurs reminiscing about The Godfather." Larry rubbed his temples. "They think it'll be nostalgic. You and Al are icons. People want to see you together." "Then they should have invited one of us," De Niro snapped. "I'm not playing along with this spectacle." At that moment, the door opened and Caitlin, a young assistant producer, stepped in. Her face was tense, and she clutched a tablet. "Mr. De Niro, are you ready for rehearsal? Mr. Kimmel wants to go over a few things before the show." De Niro didn't look up. "Tell Jimmy I'm not going out there unless they take Pacino off the show." Caitlin froze, her eyes widening. You're serious?" "Dead serious," he replied, his voice cold as steel. Caitlin hurried out, and Larry shook his head. "Bob, you just dropped a bomb. You realize that?" De Niro shrugged. "Let them deal with it." Meanwhile, in another dressing room, Al Pacino sat in front of a mirror, adjusting his tie. At 84, he still exuded the charisma that made him a legend. But tonight, his mood was far from sunny. His agent, Sophia, had just told him about De Niro's ultimatum. "He's serious?" Pacino laughed, but there was more bitterness than amusement in it. "Bob thinks I'm stealing his spotlight? After all these years?" Sophia, an elegant woman in a sharp suit, shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe he's just tired of the comparisons. You two are like brothers who keep getting pitted against each other." Pacino stood, his movements slow but deliberate. "It's not about comparison, Sophia. It's about respect. I didn't ask for this show. I was invited. And I'm not letting anyone push me out like some second-rate actor." He paused by the window, looking out at the twinkling lights of Hollywood. "You know what bugs me? Everyone thinks Bob and I are two sides of the same coin. But I'm not his shadow, and he's not mine." Sophia nodded. "So what are you going to do?" Pacino turned to her, his eyes glinting. "I'm going on that show, and Bob can decide if he wants to look like a fool." At the studio, Jimmy Kimmel was trying to keep the situation under control. His office was a chaotic hub of producers, writers, and assistants, all talking at once. The air smelled of coffee and stress. Jimmy, in his usual suit and with a smile that masked his panic, stood by a whiteboard with the show's rundown. "Let me get this straight," he said, raising a hand to quiet the room. "Robert De Niro refuses to go on if Al Pacino is on the show. Al Pacino says he'll go on even if De Niro doesn't. And we've got an hour and a half until airtime. Am I missing anything?" Caitlin, who had just returned from De Niro's dressing room, nodded. "Yes, Jimmy. And Mr. De Niro seems very serious." Jimmy rubbed his chin. "Great. Just great. We invited two of Hollywood's biggest stars, and now we might end up with neither." One of the producers, a man named Ted, stood up. "Jimmy, let's just pick one. De Niro's the bigger draw. We can have Pacino on another time." Caitlin objected. But Pacino already agreed. "If we cancel him, it'll look like we're snubbing him. Social media will explode." Jimmy sighed. "And if we cancel De Niro, it's the same story. Damn it, I just want to do a fun show." He turned to the team. "Okay, here's the plan. I'm going to talk to both of them. Alone. No agents, no middlemen. If they want to start a drama, they can do it in my office, not on air." Jimmy knocked on De Niro's dressing room door. After a brief pause, Larry opened it. "Jimmy," Larry said, "not sure this is the best time." "Larry, with all due respect, I don't have time," Jimmy replied, brushing past him. De Niro was seated, holding a glass of water. His gaze was icy, but Jimmy didn't flinch. "Bob, I get that you're not thrilled. But I need to know what's going on. Why don't you want to share the stage with Al Pacino?" De Niro was silent for a long moment before responding. "Jimmy, you're a good guy. But you don't get it. My whole life, they've put me and Al side by side like we're rivals. Every headline, every interview, De Niro versus Pacino. I'm tired of it. If I go on your show, I want to talk about my work, not answer dumb questions about who's the better actor." Jimmy nodded. "I hear you. But don't you think your boycott is just fueling those stories?" De Niro shot him a look. "Maybe. But I'm not playing their game." Jimmy sighed and left. Next stop, Pacino's dressing room. Pacino greeted Jimmy with a warm smile, but there was something sharp in his eyes. "Jimmy, I hear Bob's giving you a hell of a night," he said, pouring himself a coffee. Jimmy chuckled. "That's one way to put it. Al, I don't want to offend you, but I need to know why you're so insistent on doing the show if Bob's against it." Pacino set the cup down. "Jimmy, I respect Bob. Always have. But I'm not letting him push me out because of his whims. I'm here to talk about art, about life. If Bob can't handle that, that's his problem, not mine." Jimmy rubbed his neck. "You too. You're friends, right?" Pacino shrugged. "Friends, rivals, brothers in arms. Call it what you want. But I'm not backing down." An hour before airtime, the situation reached a boiling point. De Niro remained holed up in his dressing room, refusing even to rehearse. Pacino, meanwhile, was on stage, joking with the crew and signing autographs. Jimmy stood backstage, feeling his career teeter on the edge of disaster. But then something unexpected happened. Caitlin ran up to Jimmy, holding her phone. "Jimmy, you've got to see this. Social media's blowing up. Someone from the crew leaked the conflict. The hashtag De Niro versus Pacino is trending." Jimmy felt his blood run cold. "What?" He grabbed the phone and saw the headlines. "De Niro boycotts Kimmel show over Pacino. Is Hollywood's greatest friendship over?" The comments were worse. Some accused De Niro of ego. Others called Pacino fame-hungry. Jimmy turned to the team. "This is a disaster. If we don't fix this before airtime, we're all screwed." But deep down, he knew the only way to save the show was to get De Niro and Pacino to sit down and talk, not as stars, not as rivals, but as people. Los Angeles, ABC Studios, 45 minutes to airtime. The air is thick with tension, mixed with the smell of floor polish and freshly brewed coffee. Backstage at Jimmy Kimmel's show, conversations hum. Technicians test microphones and producers whisper, trying to hide their panic. Social media is ablaze with hashtag De Niro versus Pacino, and every new post adds fuel to the fire. Robert De Niro is locked in his dressing room. Al Pacino is joking with the crew on stage, and Jimmy Kimmel faces a choice that could define his career. Jimmy sat in his office, holding his phone. The screen glowed with dozens of messages from producers, sponsors, and even a few journalists who'd caught wind of the scandal. One TMZ headline screamed, "De Niro versus Pacino. Hollywood vendetta wrecks Kimmel's show." Jimmy felt his temple throb. He knew airtime was approaching, and if he didn't find a way to fix this, the night would be his professional nightmare. Caitlin, the assistant producer, stood by the door, nervously clutching her tablet. "Jimmy, what do we do? Ted says we should cancel one of them. Otherwise, we won't have time to rewrite the script." Jimmy shook his head. "No, canceling either one is like throwing gasoline on the fire. We need both of them out there. And not just out there, we need them to talk. For real." Caitlin raised an eyebrow. "You seriously think De Niro will agree? He won't even hear Pacino's name." Jimmy stood, his face resolute. "I'm not asking him. I'm going to make them both see that they're not just ruining my show. They're ruining what millions of people love about them." He headed toward De Niro's dressing room, but halfway there, Ted, the lead producer, stopped him. "Jimmy, hold on. This is crazy. We can bring in a comedian or a singer. We have a backup plan." "Backup plan?" Jimmy paused, his voice sharp. Ted, people tuned in to see Niro and Pacino. If we swap them out, social media will tear us apart. And I'm not going to be the host who runs from a problem. Ted sighed but stepped back. Jimmy knocked on De Niro's door. Inside the dressing room, Robert De Niro sat in a chair, holding an old photo. It showed him and Al Pacino laughing on the set of Heat in 1995. His agent, Larry, stood by the window, typing on his phone. Bob, you seen what they're saying on Twitter? They're calling it Hollywood's War of the Titans. Maybe you should just go out there and end this. Larry said, not looking up. De Niro set the photo down. I'm not fighting, Larry. I just don't want to be part of this circus. People want a show, not a conversation about movies. They want me and Al to slug it out like two old boxers. The door opened and Jimmy walked in. His usual easy smile was gone, replaced by a firm tone. Bob, we need to talk. No agents, no cameras. Just us. Larry started to object, but De Niro waved him off. All right, Jimmy. Talk. Jimmy sat across from him, his gaze direct. I get why you're mad. You're sick of being pitted against Al like your trophies. But if you don't go out tonight, you're giving them exactly what they want, drama. You think a boycott protects your dignity? It just feeds the headlines. De Niro frowned but stayed silent. Jimmy pressed on. I'm not asking you to play their game. I'm asking you to give people what they love about you, your authenticity. Sit with me, sit with Al, and show the world you're bigger than these stupid comparisons. De Niro stared at Jimmy for a long moment, his fingers tapping the table. You think I don't want that? But every time Al and I are together, they tear us apart. Who's better, who's worse? I'm tired, Jimmy. Jimmy leaned closer. Then change it. Don't fight. Talk. Show them you're not enemies. De Niro sighed, his gaze drifting to the photo. I'll think about it. Meanwhile, Al Pacino stood on stage, holding a microphone for a sound check. The crew laughed at his jokes, and he seemed in his element. But beneath the ease was tension. Sophia, his agent, stood nearby, scrolling through Twitter. Al, you seen this? She said, showing him her phone. People are saying you betrayed De Niro by agreeing to the show. Pacino laughed, but his eyes stayed serious. Betrayed? Sophia, I don't betray friends. I'm just not letting anyone push me out. Bob wants to play these games, that's his call. But I'm not leaving. He handed the mic back to a technician and sat on the edge of the stage, staring at the empty seats in the audience. A moment later, Caitlin approached. Mr. Pacino, Jimmy's with Mr. De Niro now. He's trying to convince him. Pacino nodded, his expression thoughtful. You know, Caitlin, I remember when Bob and I sat in a diner after shooting The Godfather. We talked about movies, life, everything. And now they've got us pitted against each other like characters in some cheap soap opera. Caitlin gave a hesitant smile. Maybe you could talk to him? Before the show. Pacino shook his head. If Bob wants to talk, he knows where to find me. 20 minutes to airtime, Jimmy gathered the team in the control room. The atmosphere was as tense as a thunderstorm. Monitors flickered with shots of the empty stage, where technicians made final adjustments. Okay, Jimmy began. De Niro said he'll think about it. Pacino's ready to go, but I don't want this looking like we're picking sides. We need to get them both at my desk. Ted rolled his eyes. Jimmy, that's impossible. We're out of time. There's time if we move fast, Jimmy snapped. Caitlin, get me the script. We're rewriting the opening. No jokes about their rivalry. We start with respect for their legacy, their work. Caitlin nodded and ran for the script. Jimmy turned to the team. And one more thing. I want you to find a way to get a message to Bob and Al, not from me, not from the producers. From someone neutral. What message? Ted asked. Jimmy smiled for the first time all night. That their fans don't want a war. They want to see two legends who respect each other. 10 minutes to airtime, Jimmy stood backstage, holding the revised script. He could hear the crowd buzzing with anticipation. Social media was still exploding, but now, amid the angry posts, others were emerging. I just wanted Niro and Pacino to hug it out. Enough drama. Give us the legends. Caitlin ran up, her face glowing. Jimmy, you won't believe this. De Niro just left his dressing room. He's coming. Jimmy felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. And Pacino? Already backstage. But they haven't seen each other yet. Jimmy nodded. Good. Keep them apart until I give the signal. 5 minutes to airtime. De Niro and Pacino found themselves in the same hallway. Separated by just a few yards, the crew and assistants froze, sensing the tension. De Niro, in a dark suit, stood with his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Pacino, in a light shirt with an open collar, looked at him with a faint smile. Bob, Pacino said, his voice calm but firm. You really want it to end like this? De Niro was silent for a long moment, his eyes studying Pacino. I don't want a war, but I don't want to be a clown. Pacino took a step closer. Nobody's asking you to be a clown. Let's just sit down and talk. Like we used K2. De Niro sighed, his shoulders relaxing slightly. All right, but no stupid jokes. Pacino laughed. You'll have to tell that to Jimmy. The show began. Jimmy walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, his smile wider than usual. Adrenaline coursed through his veins. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, tonight is a special night. We have two men who need no introduction. Their films have shaped a generation. Their friendship and respect for each other are what make Hollywood special. Please welcome Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. The audience erupted as De Niro and Pacino walked out together. They shook hands, and for a moment, their eyes met not as rivals, but as old friends who'd weathered a storm. Jimmy sat at his desk, feeling the tension ebb. But he knew this was just the beginning. Ahead lay a conversation that could either save the night or become an even bigger sensation. ABC Studios in Hollywood is ablaze with a glow of spotlights. The audience roars with applause as Robert De Niro and Al Pacino take their seats on the guest chairs of Jimmy Kimmel's show. The air is thick with the smell of hot metal from the lighting rigs and the faint perfume of the front row audience. Jimmy, despite his outward confidence, feels his palms slightly sweaty. Social media is still buzzing with hashtag De Niro versus Pacino, but now he has a chance to change the narrative. At stake is not just the success of the show, but the opportunity to show that even in a world where conflict sells better than peace, there's room for dialogue. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, holding the cue cards with questions, though he knew the script had long gone out the window. He glanced at De Niro, whose eyes were focused but calm, and at Pacino, who sat with a slight smile, as if savoring the moment. So, gentlemen, Jimmy began, his voice warm but cautious, you two are legends. The Godfather, Heat, Taxi Driver, Scent of a Woman. The list goes on. But I don't want to start with your films. I want to talk about what happens behind the scenes. About the pressure you face when the world tries to pit you against each other. The audience fell silent, expecting jokes or light anecdotes. They froze, sensing something extraordinary was about to unfold. De Niro glanced at Jimmy, as if weighing whether he was pushing too far. Pacino rubbed his chin, his smile turning thoughtful. You want a real conversation, Jimmy? De Niro asked, his voice low and slightly raspy. Fine. I'll give it to you. My whole life, they've put me and Al side by side like we're opponents. Who's better? Who's the bigger star? And you know what? It's exhausting. We're not competitors. We're actors. We do our job. Pacino nodded, his gaze drifting somewhere far off. Bob's right. People love drama. They want blood, even if it's just headlines. But Bob and I, we never played that game. We respect each other. Always have. The audience erupted in applause, but Jimmy raised a hand, asking for quiet. Then let me ask, he said, choosing his words carefully. There were rumors tonight that you didn't want to share the stage. Social media's blowing up. People think there's a feud between you. What would you say to those who believe that? De Niro sighed, his fingers tapping the armrest of his chair. I'd say they're wrong. I wouldn't be here if I didn't respect Al, but I'm tired of how they use us. I told Jimmy earlier, I don't want to be part of a circus. And you know what? I'm glad we're here together. Because this is our chance to tell the truth. Pacino laughed, his laugh genuine and infectious. Bob, you were always more serious than me. He turned to the audience. Listen, Bob and I are old dogs. We've seen it all, the good, the bad, the ridiculous. But we're here because we love what we do. And we're not letting anyone, not the press, not social media, define who we are. The audience clapped again, louder this time. Jimmy felt the tension in his chest dissolve completely. He glanced at Caitlin, who stood backstage, and she gave a subtle nod, holding her phone. Social media was shifting. De Niro and Pacino are pure class. This show is legendary. This is what respect looks like. Jimmy decided to go all in. He tossed the cue cards aside and leaned forward. You two have worked together on iconic films. But I want to go deeper. I want to talk about the injustices you faced in this industry. The times you were judged, pitted against each other. How did you deal with it? Pacino paused, his eyes narrowing. You know, Jimmy, when I started, they told me I was too ethnic. That I'd never be a star because my name didn't sound American. But I didn't listen. I worked. And every time they tried to put me down, I answered with my work. De Niro nodded, his face softening. Same here. They called me too intense, too New York. But I didn't fight the people who said that. I just made the movies I wanted. And you know what? The best way to answer injustice is to do your job better than they expect. The audience roared with applause. Jimmy felt goosebumps on his skin. He knew this wasn't just an interview. It was a moment people would remember. What about you two? He continued. How do you handle being constantly compared? Pacino looked at De Niro, his eyes twinkling. I'll let you in on a secret, Jimmy. Bob and I don't compare ourselves. We respect each other. When I watch his work, I learn. And I know he does the same with mine. De Niro smiled, a rare, genuine smile. AL's right. We're not enemies. We're brothers. And brothers don't compete, they support each other. The audience stood, the applause so loud it seemed the studio walls were shaking. Jimmy felt his eyes mist, but he quickly covered it with a joke. Well, gentlemen, you just made me feel like I'm hosting a historical documentary, not a talk show. The show was nearing its end. Jimmy knew he had to close on a high note, but didn't want to push his guests. He decided to give them the final word. Before we wrap, he said, what would you like to say to your fans watching tonight? De Niro looked straight into the camera, his voice calm but powerful. Thank you for supporting us all these years. And don't believe everything you read. Al and I are here because we love movies. And we love you. Pacino added, his voice warm as the evening sun. Live your life. Don't let anyone tell you who you are. And come see my next movie, all right? The audience laughed, and Jimmy stood, shaking hands with both guests. Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, ladies and gentlemen, he announced, and the stage drowned in cheers. After the show, backstage was a scene of euphoria. Technicians hugged, producers sighed in relief, and Caitlin showed Jimmy her phone. The hashtag De Niro Pacino Unity had overtaken all previous trends. Fan posts flooded in. This was like therapy for the soul. Thank you, Jimmy, for bringing them together. This is why they're legends. De Niro and Pacino stood in the hallway, each holding a glass of water. They didn't say much, but their eyes spoke volumes. Not bad for two old dogs, huh? Pacino said, winking. De Niro laughed. Don't get used to it, Al, I still hate talk shows. They shook hands and parted ways, each to their own dressing room, each with their own thoughts. But in that handshake was something more than a goodbye. It was a promise that their friendship could withstand any storm. Jimmy stood nearby, watching them. Caitlin approached, her face beaming. You did it, Jimmy. You saved the show. He shook his head, his smile quiet. Not me. Them. I just gave them the stage. The next morning, Los Angeles woke to new headlines. De Niro and Pacino unite on Kimmel show, the night that changed Hollywood. Social media buzzed with clips from the show, and fans shared De Niro and Pacino's quotes like they were gospel. But not all questions were answered. Some in the comments still debated whether the conflict was staged. Others wondered if De Niro and Pacino would work together again. And though the show was a triumph, Jimmy knew Hollywood was a machine that would always hunt for the next drama. Yet something had shifted that night. Two men, whom decades had tried to divide, showed that respect and dialogue could outshine any rumor. And though their journey was just one step in a vast world, that step left a mark, not only in the hearts of fans, but in those who believed that even in the loudest conflicts, there was room for hope.